Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we're looking at a brand new deck profile to the channel, a brand new archetype to the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! We're looking at Goblin Bikers. This deck is so cool, honestly. It's one of the coolest decks that have come out in quite a bit, in my opinion. It has a really cool mechanic where it can kind of punish other XYZ decks. Unfortunately, there's not a ton in this format, but that's just one of those things to say, as long as there's potential here, if we ever end up in an Exceed heavy format, this deck can actually just punish, those types of decks and actually just give them like a really nasty matchup into anything running on the same wavelength as it. So it's really, really cool. This is an early build, some stuff here is cool, some stuff we're trying out, but it definitely needs a little more testing, I think, at this point. But I do really like some of the directions we're going in here, and we'll show them off as we go. So without further ado, let's jump into it. If you want to see more videos from me down the line, maybe some combo videos or combo tutorials kind of on this type of deck and things you can do, definitely let me know in the comment section down below. But let's just run through the profile. This is going to be pretty quick and simple, I think. So starting off with our monster lineup, we start with 3 copies of Goblin Biker. Doug Charger, he's the main monster in the main deck. 1 copy of your Clatter Sploder. Sorry, I remember the OCG names, but the TCG names are just a little bit different. Mean Merciless, and then 1 copy of Boom Mock. So some people may not be on this same ratio. To me, Doug is by far the best one, just for the sole fact that it's actually a 1-card play. He does get you to be able to just play on his own, which is something, especially with an extender, it helps even more. But yeah, it works, right? Aside from that, these guys are all extenders in their own right. Even he's an extender too, and that's why I like him so much, is he's an extender if you need him to be, but he can also be a starter if you need him to be. So between these 3, these all have these. I believe it's these 2. No, it's these 2, I think. No, I have it right. These are weird. So they all have the effect to summon themselves by detaching a material from an Exceed monster on the field, yours or your opponent's. And then some of them do something on summon, right? Mean Merciless, I believe, can summon another monster from grave, whereas Sploder can summon another one from, oh no, she's from hand. He's from grave. Yeah, I get them mixed up a little bit. And then Boom Mock being able to summon himself from hand or grave by detaching a material. He just won't be able to summon himself next turn. He would have to wait another turn cycle to be used again. But still a really good card, but that's why I like him at 1. He's kind of one of those cards you just get in rotation, and then throughout the course of the duel, he'll be able to keep making his presence known. It is important to note that as one-ofs, these 2 specifically do banish themselves when they leave the field, but obviously that can be bypassed by Exceed with, overlaying with them. But if they are removed from the field by like an opponent's effect, that does change some things. But I do play a card in the extra that hopefully can help mitigate that as well. All right, I like those as one-ofs. There's like a weird thing in the deck where if your opponent is able to just interrupt you enough where you never get to an XYZ monster, all of them are just dead. And that's one thing I'm deathly afraid of, is like, if my opponent can just keep me from an Exceed monster, plain and simple, like you can be in a lot of trouble. And so I don't want to go too hard on them, because they don't help you play if you just have another 3. You have to already get to an Exceed for them to be extenders. So that's something I definitely wanted to focus on by putting them at 1. And it also makes room for other stuff in the deck. All right, the next best engine I think you can play in this deck is the Punk engine. It's just too good. So 1 copy of Xiamen, 1 copy of Madam Spider, and then 3 Fortune or Foxy Tune. Interesting thing here, sorry I have the 1 Ogre Dance. I actually only own 2 Foxy Tune, but I would play 3 here, I think, to try this out at this time. So E-Telly already can summon these 2, but also just for more consistency, being able to summon Xiamen out of the deck without normal summoning is still really nice, because you're just able to still get a 3. You're able to get 2 3s basically in rotation without having to do much at all, which I really like. So that's really cool. And then Madam Spider being able to get you the trap card to make your board even better, and also just less of a liability versus board breakers such as like Dark Ruler No More is pretty nice. But I like this. I'm not used to the punk package. I've had it for a while in the binder, but I haven't played with it too much. You know, feel free to let me know if you're like, if you have a little more experience with the punk engine, if you think ratios should be changed up a little bit. I didn't want to play Ogre Dance, even though it's nice consistency, because this deck already gets bodied by Droll. That's one of the biggest gripes I have about this deck, is at this point, this deck gets bodied by Droll and Nit, the two highest ceiling hand traps basically in the game, aside from maybe Shifter. They both kind of body this deck unless you open like a nasty hand. And so I didn't want to play even harder into that. But still figuring it out. Let me know what you think about the ratio there as well. I'd definitely be curious about that. Moving on. Then we have some generic cards that are still just so good in the deck. 3 copies of Tour Guide from the Underworld, 2 Terror Top, and 1 Takatomborg. So these are your most generic, just insane cards that just help you kind of attack what this deck likes to do, and that's make rank 3s. The main rank 3 in the deck, Big Gabonga, is actually a really cool card where if you just get to him, you could not open a single Goblin Biker card, and just making Gabonga is like full combo basically. And so that's what these cards allow you to do. They're just single cards that just allow you to make a rank 3. Terror Top's maybe the single best card you can open in the entire deck, aside from maybe like E-Telly arguably. But just because it gets you the full setup without normal summoning. And that's really cool. So it means even into interaction, whether it's hand traps or into a board, if they hand trap Terror Top and then you still go normal summon Tour Guide or normal summon Xiamen or whatever, you're still just cracked at that point. So really, really cool. They do a good job. Takatomborg is a medium brick. It's definitely a brick. You don't want to draw it. There are some ways for you to get around it though. You could just open Terror Top potentially, or there's things like one of the Boom Mock is a win, so if you ever just get into any of the Goblin Biker stuff, you can get Boom Mock out and then eventually summon Takatomborg just to make use of the body. But plus I think there's some extra deck monsters in our deck that are wins as well to potentially unlock it. And the last like actual monster in the main deck is Junk Forward. This is an interesting card. So Doug is one of the best cards in your deck, so we do play Rhoda to even get to it even more consistently. Not that you have to though. But I thought a cool thing there was that like that is a 3 of Doug. So if you opened like Rhoda plus Doug, it's literally dead. So I'd like to have a secondary target. So this is just a simple warrior level 3 extender. You could also play Kage Mucha Knight instead of this, but that's basically the idea. Is if you already have Doug and then you have Rhoda, you can search this as a different target, and then if you ever hard draw, it's just a level 3 that jumps on the board. Gets you, that's what your game plan is. Just put 3s on board. Into Spells and Traps, 3 copies of your Goblin Grand Entrance. This card's insane. This card is actually so crazy. Being able to search any Goblin monster, but if you chose to detach a material from an XYZ monster, then it's also special summoning a Goblin from hand. Then, in the same turn, at any point, you can just banish this card from grave and add any Goblin monster from grave back to your hand. This card is actually wild. It's one of the craziest Rhodas we've seen in recent memory, and as the deck gets more support down the line, this card is only going to get better as well. Next up, 3 E-Telly. Of course, I don't really need to explain this. You summon Xiamen with it, you put a lot of pressure on your opponent. Plus, I also love that starting with an E-Telly can actually kind of bluff your opponent. You can kind of bluff your opponent into making them think you're actually playing Punk or, you know, Gold Pride Punk or something. And then you could potentially then just, if they interrupt that, then you just go like normal Tour Guide and then just like win the game if that resolves. More consistently, just 1 Rhoda. I know Droll kicks us in the cheeks, but to be honest, I am still a little worried about consistency with this deck. So I did just want to be ready for that by playing the Rhoda. So there, 1 called. It's called. I'm playing this in literally every deck right now because I don't even think it's a bad like quote unquote board breaker or utility card. And then for like sort of bricks, this one's definitely a brick. This one's fine. 2 traps. They make your board just significantly better. This is for the Armored Exceed package. You have to play it in this deck. It's too good not to play. And then the Danger is a Gabu. This is basically just an infinite impermanence, but you have to set it. So it's fine. I like that it doesn't require a Punk. So even if you just hard draw this, you just set it and it's fine. But it does make, both these cards kind of make it so that we don't just like auto lose to something like a Dark Ruler no more. It makes our board like much more respectable in that regard, that they can't just Dark Ruler and it turns off everything we have. We actually would still have some things for them to deal with. And then after that, you just have a bunch of defensive cards. So triple Ash, oh, that's too low. Triple Ash, triple Veiler, double Crow, 1 Ogre, and then 3 Imperm. Sorry if some of these are being cut off here. Yeah, this ratio is cool. I realized that after long enough, that Droll's actually not amazing versus Snake Eye. Even they have like 1 card combos that work around Droll and like still set up a good amount of interruption. So to me, the card's kind of like Nib. It's been power crept to the point where like when Nib first came out, it was really good, and now you feel like you have to open it with a second hand trap. Otherwise, your opponent's probably just beating Nib if that's the only hand trap in your hand. Feels kind of the same with Droll. It's just not quite enough for the best stacks on its own. And so I decided to go with more of the trade options. You really want to open 2 of these if you're going second, and then hopefully enough engine to slow Snake Eye down and then be able to play on your turn. But these are some good hand traps. The Snow Ogre is probably the weirdest one, or the Ghost Ogre, rather. Basically, it's another E-Telly target. There can be some really cheeky interactions where you can either summon it off of E-Telly playing into a board, so that way now it like is contesting something that might be activating, like an IP Masquerena or something. And even as an extra interruption. If we had maybe opened double E-Telly, which is not once per turn, and maybe the first one just summoned the Xiamen and you went full combo, you could just set the second one and then summon Ghost Ogre on your opponent's turn for an extra interruption there. So it's cool. But room for 12 hand traps is not bad for like a combo heavier E-deck like this one. Into the extra deck, 2 copies of Big Gabonga. You definitely need 2. This is like the Isol, the Halki Fibrax of this deck. Which if you don't know, as being a very clear choke point in the deck. If this doesn't get negated and you do not resolve your turn 1 combo, you do want to have a second one to be able to attempt to resolve it on turn 3 or 4. Armor Exceed package, 1 Torpedo, 1 Fortress, 1 Dark Knight Lancer. Nothing too much to say here. I would still look at Crystal Zero Lancer. That card's still really good, but space is actually kind of tight here. We'll talk about that. 1 Leviair the Sea Dragon, 1 Cicada King, and 1 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. This card is basically here as a concession to putting the 3 Goblin Biker names at 1 that aren't dug, because 2 of them banish themselves when they leave the field if they're not able to be made into XYZ monsters immediately. And so I wanted a way to potentially get those back, because they are cards you want to like keep, like get in rotation. 1 Cicada King, sometimes you end on this, sometimes you're able to make this on the opponent's turn. It's a decent little interruption. It's just a walking impermanence, basically. And then Gossip Shadow. Gossip Shadow is important because if you open a really good hand that kind of has, let's say for example, you open like Tour Guide plus like E-Telly, you'd be able to like E-Telly for the Punk Engine. The Punk Engine gets you to Gossip Shadow without normal summoning, and then you're able to make Gossip Shadow, you make Gossip Shadow, and then you're able to normal summon Tour Guide and do your actual combo under Gossip Shadow. Now, you still lose to Droll in that scenario, and that's the toughest part, is that most of the ways you even get to this before normal summoning in a deck like this, you still like are getting Drolled, which is still pretty brutal, but at least you would beat Nib in most of those scenarios with this card. So Nib is still a problem. Droll's just tough, man. This deck just really doesn't have much to say to Droll except like pass or scoop. It's brutal. Also mess around with the Utopic Future package. Just pretty easy to make with a lot of the lines. The deck just has easy ways to just keep putting more and more of their 3s on the field. Fortune Tune, Downard, and Zeus. I don't have Typhon in here. I think that may be the first card I would look to add into the extra, unless you guys have any other suggestions. Oh, the other one would be like the Phantom Knight Breaksword. There's not a ton of removal in the deck, so like maybe just as a simple, even though you lose the monster, like clear a card kind of thing, playing into a board, maybe even just make, starting with Terror Top, going straight into that, and then like trying to bait out an interruption is important. But that could be something. There's a couple other cards I'd look at, but this package feels too good. Like, you have to play Zeus no matter what. There's an argument that we don't need these because we have like the Armor Exceed package. You can always just make a 3, any 3, and then just like walk into this. So there's an argument we don't need these, but I still like them, but if we don't, we definitely could look at some other utility extra deck cards as well. But the Zeus has to be there. It's too good not to. And then IP and SP finishing out. I know this doesn't make the deck budget, but like I said, Typhon or Break Sword, there's some other options. You don't have to play these. There's just some scenarios where like, oh, I kind of am building my board. I have 2 monsters left on the field. Do I want to just overlay them for a Cicada King? Or would I rather make IP Masquerena and have like 2 bonus interruptions instead of just an impermanence? It is just stronger, plus the utility of SP. This deck doesn't ever lock you into Exceeds, really, so, you know, being able to make this on the fly for, like, easy utility removal is still really useful. Not an absolute must, but, you know, still probably correct overall is probably where those cards end up. But all in all, I think the deck's really sweet. I really do. I've been having a lot of fun messing around with it. The combos are really cool. I like the deck also. The Armored Exceed package is so cool because it punishes weenie hand traps so much. Everybody's going to be worried about like negate Gabanga, negate, you know, the Rhoda when you activate it, right? They're going to ash that, they're going to imperm Gabanga, and then you just get to like overlay for the Armored Exceed package, get at least 1 interruption out of it, and then you're just like, all right. We'll kind of just like barrel through. We'll still plus here. We'll get this plus like 1 or 2 hand traps in hand, like, and end on like 3 or 4 interruptions, and then your opponent's like still neg 1 or 2 in the hand. So it feels pretty good. I like the way the deck plays. Like I said, it's gonna be tough when we're in a format like this where Nib and Droll just crush this deck. Now, we might be moving in a position into the format where Droll's just not as good as a lot of us initially thought, and that's definitely something to keep an eye on going forward, but I still think overall, like, it's going to probably cripple this deck for at least a couple weeks until people realize that maybe Droll's not as good as we initially thought, but we're going to have to wait around until then. And then Nib's always kind of going to float around, but it is what it is. So yeah, deck's really cool. Let me know your thoughts down below on this early build. Again, needs more testing for sure. This is like a super early build. This is more theory than anything, but I'd still love to hear your guys' thoughts on this down below. I'm definitely taking suggestions. Let me know if there's any other engines you've been testing out or specific cards, utility cards that definitely I should take a look at. I'd love to hear that down below. But I'm out of here. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.